Hi, I'm Ernest Stormann. I'm here to talk about fulfillment services at Kroger and how we went through an architectural transformation and what that meant for our architecture. So start with, who am I? I'm Ernest Stormann. I have 25 years in architectural and app development experience. I am a senior advanced solution architect with Kroger Technology Division, and I work specifically in supply chain on fulfillment last mile. So the driver for this is a transformation that we did Kroger-wide, call it Kroger Restock, and it's a retail transformation effort. It started in 2018. It was an enterprise-wide effort, and the intent was to drive development in e-commerce that was really aimed at building out our infrastructure and technology, and also identifying where we could partner for customer value, which is our way of saying where we have gaps in our technology stack. How can we find other partners that fill those gaps and deliver value for the customer? It was also a huge focus around redefining what the grocery customer experience was. In the e-commerce space, that's around data, personalization, and really investing in the digital, meaning the digital experience that we have as an e-commerce pipeline through the entire system and how that affects the customer experience. So as a part of this transformation, the drivers that were really pushing us to change was that we had a fundamental mission change within our fulfillment last mile. We were moving from a very store operation focused set of activities, because we had fulfillment in the stores for several years prior, but it was very much a store local operation and not an enterprise-wide enablement system. And so obviously enabling that as an e-commerce system enterprise-wide was one of our huge drivers, as well as integrating those systems with front-end systems, ERP, all the enterprise e-commerce systems that existed within, and there were several that we had to integrate with, as well as this was all in line with supporting the growth of our e-commerce and really adapting to the change that we were seeing in the market. Quite a few different customer behaviors that we were responding to. So, I edited some images here to support the Star Wars theme of May the 4th be with us. So this is meant to symbolize what the process was that we were starting with, and that is that it was very application focused. All of our retail orders, I consider them containers that we were trying to move from the beginning of our process into the customer's hands. And it was very much a monolith, a large block that we moved through the system. So in our rethink, one of the huge issues was that building for scale is not building for durability. We were having quite a few issues with the system in that any changes in a sequential system was causing holdups in the pipeline. There were orders that would be stuck if previous orders didn't get satisfied, or if an order had any errors, it would essentially stop the pipeline in place. And those were not durable. So the new process that we were trying to imagine at the ideation stage is, how do we turn these into lots of sequential systems that independently move, that are not cross-blocking, and if there was an individual problem with it, it would still continue on in a compliant workflow in a way that allowed us to recover quickly from those errors. It needed to be more durable and more resilient. And so the first thing we really approached is, we need to focus on the output, not the mechanism of production. This was a real paradigm shift in our thought process, where instead of focusing on the applications, the monoliths, you will, that moved our system forward, we need to think of it in terms of smaller services or even serverless functions, and what those individual units of work look like. Because that is the true value of the system, is what it outputs, and to focus less on what it is that was running in the system. And so as a part of that in-depth, really first person or first principle approach to what it means to satisfy the customer, we dove deep into the architecture. And I really want to stress that how you think about architecture is directly related to how you think about the problem. Your architecture has to align with the paradigm, and that it's looking at loosely coupled events. We were looking at very agile business requirements in that environment. We were constantly being asked by operations to either add new functionality or alter existing functionality to try to optimize our engagement with the customer. Because of the huge ramp up in load, we were finding that our systems needed to not only be highly scalable, but they needed to be highly durable. One of the things that you run into in a system that you scale is that you scale the errors as fast as you scale the capabilities. And your ability to manage errors usually isn't set up to be scaled like your ability to have a product is. So for the most part, we were trying to build a system that didn't have those problems or was self-healing, and it didn't require human intervention in order to resolve those problems. So pretty much the definition of durable and resilient in trying to align the architecture to support those non-functional requirements. And this is a point where architecture is highly influenced by how you think, or vice versa. How you think can directly lead to a specific architecture. So we really wanted to dive deep into the problem set and think about it in new ways so that we could understand the problem from its true origins, not just the way that we had always done things or carry forward philosophy that we hadn't really truly evaluated to ensure that it made sense in our new environment. And here's why I want to call out diversity is critical. Going to all of our stakeholders, making sure that we're really intentional about who we pull into the process, and making sure we've got all the points of view we need so that when we solve the problem, we're thinking of it from all the different angles. No one person is going to see all the ways to solve a problem, which the way we discuss that problem is that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and that's really what we were trying to avoid. And I also want to throw in here, because I'm sort of describing the context in the environment, we have a highly complex supply chain. And if anybody remembers the beginning of COVID and some of the issues that we were going through while this architecture was being thought about, the complexity of our supply chain, how we react to it, how we understand it, was a huge driver in that big ecosystem that is really dictating what our architecture needed to manage. So like I said, we drilled this down into first principles, where we didn't carry forward any of the previous solutions as a reliant mechanism for how we continue to operate. We reviewed multiple patterns. We looked at unit of work. We looked at message routing. We looked at batching and sweeping, and we looked at event-driven workflows. Each of those were either processes that Kroger was using at the time, so there was a consistent approach we would have had with other groups, or it was technology that we had proven out and were confident in, we knew to scale. But each of them had significant issues when we were looking at all of the dynamic systems that we were trying to manage and build analysis around. And so we really drove into that event-driven workflows, because it was really hitting all the key points we were trying to solve for. Also relevant, because architecture is all about context, we were having teams. These are factors that featured into what solution we chose. And the teams were moving to smaller units of code and logic. We were really trying to get away from that monolith and go either down to really small microservices or even smaller with serverless. Analytics was introduced as a first-class concern. Kroger has a great branch of analytics, and we were trying to push that into the far edges of all the business processes so that we were both utilizing analytics and surfacing those data streams that would contribute to analytics that were done higher up in the company hierarchy. And as, of course, we were moving to the cloud. That was a huge consideration as a part of our architecture, is that, as as a cloud-first system, did we have processes and native tools that fit within that architecture? I've said before, we were prioritizing resiliency. We were also doing some deep dives into what are our domain boundaries and how do we really centralize on contracts first is how we interacted with the rest of the business. And of course, one of the features that I showed in that complexity diagram with supply chain was that retail operations are a lot like IoT swarms. A lot of signals, a lot of events, a lot of information is coming from a lot of places in the company all at once. So we did choose event-driven architecture as our architecture pattern of choice. And there's a lot of details in how we implement that. But as an overarching structure, we went with event-driven. And the reason why is really what I want to share. It's a lot of context, a lot of drivers, but everybody is in the place where they need to make decisions about their architecture. No one can tell you what the right answer is for you. The best we can do is really give you the reasoning behind those decisions and see if they're a good fit for your environment or what work you're engaging with. So our lessons are, we were really focusing on the data stream because it encourages reacting to processes that mutate data or mutate the state of our workflow. It was a good fit for an environment that was events and event driven. We were decoupling process from our workflows. What that means is that if a process failed, it wouldn't stop a workflow, or we may have multiple different processes that we wanted to engage with in order to make sure the workflows were appropriate for a business use. Swapping them out quickly is much easier when they're decoupled. And I think I mentioned previously, we wanted to treat supply chain and e-commerce in general as events or signals into how we managed our business process. That can be anything from ensuring that we're going to the cheapest source for products in order to fulfill an order, that we're going to the fastest or most fresh supply chain that is appropriate for the modality that we had under review. But all in all, those signals are what allows us to make the right choices in our workflows dynamically. And also resiliency. Our stores, trucks, remote environments, those can be a networking challenge, and keeping in sync with all of those is hard to do. So an environment that allowed us to suffer some of that challenges and to be resilient in the face of those was a non-functional requirement that we couldn't give up. We had to find something that would do that as a first-class citizen. And of course, operating in a cloud environment and at the edge on a consistent or eventually consistent basis is part and parcel with that resiliency. We needed workloads to be put in the right place for the right piece of those elements. And I said it before, analytics. Analytics is first-class citizen in all of this. And we really need to make sure event streams were in the proper format to be processed in real time and to give us intelligible, actionable intelligence. So now that we've discussed why we chose that architecture, I should share that we're about 30 to 40% into this effort. We're not complete, probably will never be complete the way we're constantly reacting to changing customer behavior. But we are realizing some benefits, and this is what event-driven can bring to you. Scalability is now a platform responsibility. The individual dev teams really don't have to tell the system how to scale. It does it as a feature. Business continuity and disaster recovery is now an infrastructure concern. Those events, how we manage the mesh and how we understand how events transfer through the system. If we need to recover from a loss or we need to move all of our data from one region to another, the infrastructure manages that. It's no longer an application team that has to respond to that. And the application teams, because of the size of the code they're writing, deal with far less complexity and can be more productive when they're facing the business requirements. So in order to be, honest to what the effort was, we have to look at what are the downsides or what are the things that we have to mitigate as a part of choosing an event-driven architecture. Not everything is always just pros on the pro-con decision matrix. We have added complexity. Our system functionality moved from software to an architecture-based configuration. The the way that the system operates is now moving a layer above the application to how we configure events and event responses and how we wire to those. So really understanding how that complexity shows up at a higher level is key to making sure that you're getting that done. And that's why I put the warning here, which isn't to steer any way away from this, but we discovered as a part of our learnings that in order to build a really resilient system in a distributed environment, you have to manage all of your paths, not just happy paths. And for those that don't know, sad path is error handling, it's exception handling whenever your data is bad. All the things that aren't the way you anticipated them, you have to be able to manage them as a first-class citizen in your environment. And those are now detected at an analytics layer higher than the app. Events are not outcomes. You still have to manage to your outcomes. Events are a powerful tool to get there, and event-driven architecture is the best tool we have found. But we did find out that those analytics and people reviewing those and making sure we're hitting our targets are now a platform and an enterprise-wide concern, not just an application concern. And you'll need to build those systems that are engineered to troubleshoot those and make sure that you can still manage the systems that you've decoupled yourself out of. And that really wraps up my summary of our journey to event-driven architecture. All right, thanks.